The old man's hand was bleeding before anyone in that diner even looked up from their coffee. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, the kind where the sky can't decide between gray and white and just stays both. The Sunrise Diner on Route 9 outside Beckley, West Virginia, had been open since 5 a.m., same as it had been for 31 years. The booths were cracked vinyl. The coffee was strong and bad. The parking lot held 2 pickup trucks, a sedan with a busted taillight, and a motorcycle, a big road-worn Harley with Missouri plates and a patched leather saddlebag, that had no business being parked next to anything so ordinary. Nobody noticed when the 3 men followed the biker inside. Nadia was already on her second table by then. She'd taken the early shift because rent was due Friday, and tips were better before 8 when the truckers came through. 23 years old, 5'4", wearing a ponytail and an apron, with a coffee stain shaped like the state of Florida on the left pocket. She'd grown up 11 miles east of here, in a double-wide with her grandmother, Ruthie, who raised her after her mother left and her father followed not long after. Ruthie had taught her 2 things: how to make cornbread from scratch and how to read a room. Nadia read the room. The 3 men who came in behind the old biker didn't sit down. That was the first thing. They stood near the door in a loose triangle, the way men do when they're not there to eat. The biker, gray-bearded, heavyset, wearing a vest covered in patches she couldn't read from across the room, took a stool at the counter and set his helmet on the one beside him. He ordered coffee, black, without looking at a menu. The tallest of the 3 men said something to the biker's back, low enough that Nadia couldn't hear it, but she watched the biker's shoulders go stiff. She kept pouring coffee. She watched. The second man, younger, maybe mid-20s, with a shaved head and a skull tattoo climbing the side of his neck, moved to the stool on the other side of the biker and sat down without being invited. The third man stayed near the door, not blocking it exactly, just near it. The counterman, old Pete, had worked at this diner for 19 years and had developed the practiced skill of seeing nothing that might cause him trouble. He turned to the grill and started scraping it, even though there was nothing on it to scrape. Nadia set the coffee pot back on the warmer. Later, people would ask her what she was thinking in that moment. She never had a clean answer. She wasn't thinking about being brave. She wasn't thinking about what might happen to her. She was thinking, if she was being honest, about a night 10 years ago when she was 13, walking home from school, and a car full of older boys slowed down beside her, and every adult on that sidewalk looked away. All of them, every single one. She'd walked the rest of the way home alone, heart-hammering, telling herself that was just how the world worked. She'd believed it for a long time. She walked over to the counter. "Can I get you gentlemen something?" she said, to the tall man, not the biker. The tall man looked at her the way men like that always look, like she'd interrupted something, like she was furniture that had started talking. "We're not eating," he said. "Then I'm going to have to ask you to give up the stool," she said. "We got paying customers." There was a silence. The skull tattoo man turned slowly on his stool and looked at her. The biker hadn't moved, hadn't turned around. His hands were flat on the counter. "You don't want to get involved in this, sweetheart," the tall man said. "My name's not Sweetheart," Nadia said. She said it quietly, not like she was trying to start something, like she was just correcting a mistake. The tall man stepped toward the counter. What happened next took less time than it takes to describe. The skull tattoo man stood up and shoved the biker, a hard 2-handed shove that sent him off the stool. The biker went down hard. His forehead caught the edge of the counter on the way, and there was the sick sound of it, and then he was on the floor with blood running into his eyebrow, and he was 60-something years old and moving slowly, like a man whose joints had already seen too many winters. Nadia stepped between them. She put herself between the skull tattoo man and the man on the floor, and she planted her feet, and she said, loudly enough now that the whole diner could hear, "Back up. Right now. Girl, you need to." I said, "Back up." Old Pete had disappeared into the kitchen. 2 of the 4 customers in the booths were staring at their plates. One woman, mid-40s, had her phone out. The 4th customer, a heavy-set man near the window, half rose from his seat, looked at the 3 men, and sat back down. The tall man laughed. Not a real laugh, the kind that's meant to end conversations. "You got no idea," he said, "what you're standing in the middle of." "I know exactly what I'm standing in the middle of," Nadia said. 3 grown men and one who can't get up off the floor. That's what I'm standing in the middle of. And I'm not moving. She wasn't performing. That was the thing nobody who heard the story later quite understood. She wasn't doing it for the woman with the phone, or for old Pete hiding in the kitchen, or for any idea she had about herself. She just could not make herself take a step back. She had tried that once, at 13, on a sidewalk. She'd spent 10 years not being able to forget it. The skull tattoo man grabbed her arm, and then the door opened. It wasn't a dramatic entrance. No roar of engines, no Hollywood slow motion. The door just opened and 4 men walked in wearing leather vests, not like the bikers' worn, road-stained one, but clean, dark, deliberate. And they stopped when they saw what was in front of them. The one in front was big, with a red-gray beard and hands like coal shovels. And he took in the scene in about 2 seconds. The old man on the floor, the blood on his face. The young woman with a man's hand wrapped around her forearm. He said one word, Harlan. The skull tattoo man's name was apparently Harlan, because he let go of Nadia's arm immediately and took a step back. The big man in the vest came to the counter. He crouched down next to the biker on the floor. Vincent, he said, you with me? Vincent, the biker, said something low that Nadia couldn't hear. The big man stood up. He looked at the tall man near the door. I think you need to go, he said. Not angry. Just certain they went. Nobody in the diner said anything for a moment. Old Pete reappeared from the kitchen, somehow with a dish towel he hadn't had before. The woman with the phone was still holding it, though Nadia couldn't tell if she'd been filming or just frozen. One of the vest men helped Vincent up. Someone pressed a clean towel to the cut on his head. Nadia got the first aid kit from under the counter. The one that hadn't been opened in so long the latch was stiff, and she cleaned the cut herself, because nobody else seemed to know what to do, and because her grandmother had taught her that too. Vincent sat on the stool and let her. You the one who stood in the way? He said. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment. He had pale blue eyes, tired around the edges, the kind of eyes that had seen a lot of weather. You're either the bravest person in this room or the dumbest, he said. Probably some of both, she said. He almost smiled. The big man, whose name turned out to be Cash, which was not the name on his vest but the one everyone called him, had stepped outside to make phone calls. When he came back in, he sat down 2 stools away from Vincent and ordered coffee, black, and looked at Nadia while she poured it. You work here every morning? He asked. Most mornings. How long? 2 years. How come? She thought about it. Rent, she said. Cash nodded like that was the most honest answer he'd heard in a while. Vincent turned out to be Vincent Rourke, and he was in fact a member of the Iron Meridian MC, which was not the Hells Angels and not a household name, but in certain counties of West Virginia and Kentucky, it was a name people knew. He'd been passing through Beckley on his way to a funeral in Roanoke. A store brother, cancer, gone in 4 months. And he'd stopped for coffee because he was tired, and the 3 men had followed him in from the lot, which was a separate problem he'd been carrying since Louisville that he didn't feel like explaining to the police. He tried to give Nadia money. She said no. He tried again. She said no again, and refilled his coffee, and went to check on her other tables, which were now all staring at her with the quiet, unsettled look of people who have witnessed something they're not sure how to categorize. Cash was the one who asked for her number. Not personally. He said it plainly, like a business matter. Vincent's going to want to reach you. After the funeral, after things settle. Would that be all right? She wrote her number on a receipt ticket and handed it across the counter. She didn't think about it again for 2 weeks. Ruthie was the one who answered when Cash called. Nadia had given the diner's landline because her cell was prepaid and sometimes ran out, and Ruthie told her that evening that a man with a polite voice had called and asked if Nadia still worked Tuesday mornings, and that she'd told him yes because she didn't see why not. What did you say his name was? Ruthie asked. I didn't, Nadia said. Ruthie looked at her the way grandmothers look when they know more than they're saying. The next Tuesday, Vincent Rourke walked into the Sunrise Diner at 7:15 and sat at the counter. He didn't look like a man who'd been on the floor bleeding 2 weeks ago. He looked like a man who'd been to a funeral and come back from it, which is its own kind of heavy. He ordered coffee, black, and waited until the morning rush thinned out. Then he said, I asked around about you. That right, Nadia said. Heard you grew up rough. Grandmother raised you. Mom's gone, Dad's gone. You've been at this diner 2 years with no days off since January because you're trying to put money together for something. She looked at him steadily. What else did you hear? That you're the one who helped old Mrs. Patton carried groceries to her car every Thursday for the past year without ever being asked. That you paid the Diaz kids' library fine out of your own pocket because he was embarrassed. That Pete, he nodded toward the kitchen, calls you the only reason this diner doesn't fall apart. Nadia said nothing. I'm not here to make you uncomfortable, Vincent said. I'm here because I want to say something, and I want to say it to your face. He set down the coffee cup. What you did that morning, standing in the way, that wasn't small, you understand that? You had no reason to do it. You had every reason to look the other way, same as everyone else in this room did, and you didn't. Nadia looked at the counter. I appreciate the kind words, she said, but I'm not sure I did anything that special. I couldn't walk away. That's the whole thing, Vincent said. That's the entire thing. Most people can. You couldn't. He left a 20 under the coffee cup and went outside. Cash was waiting in the parking lot. What happened next was not a dramatic offer. It wasn't the kind of thing that happens in movies, where someone hands over a check or makes a speech. It was more like a conversation, and then another conversation, and then a series of small practical things that started adding up. Vincent had a shop in Charleston. Rourke's Cycle and Repair, 32 years in business, the kind of place that did work other shops turned down because they didn't know how. His full-time front desk manager had just retired after 11 years. The job wasn't glamorous. It was phones, scheduling, ordering parts, dealing with customers who came in frustrated and needed someone patient enough to hear them out before things went sideways. Cash said, Vincent thinks you could do it. Nadia said, I've never worked in a shop. Cash said, he knows. She thought about it for 3 days. She talked to Ruthie, who listened to the whole story over cornbread and then said, You've been making strangers comfortable in a diner at 5 in the morning for 2 years. I think you can make bikers comfortable on the phone. She thought about the way Ruthie's blood pressure medication kept going up in price. She thought about the heating bill from last January. She thought about a lot of things. She called Cash back on Thursday. She gave 2 weeks' notice to the Sunrise Diner. Old Pete cried, which surprised her. The woman who'd had her phone out that Tuesday morning had, it turned out, been filming, and the video had made it onto a local news Facebook page and then a regional station. And the story had gotten a small amount of attention in the way that stories like this do, briefly and warmly, before the news moved on. Nadia hadn't watched it. She didn't need to. The job at Rourke's Cycle and Repair turned out to be harder than she expected and better than she expected in roughly equal measure. The customers were not easy. Vincent's clients were mostly working men with limited patience and zero interest in being told their bike wouldn't be ready until next week. The parts suppliers were worse. The filing system the previous manager had used made sense only to herself, and she was gone. But Nadia had spent 2 years memorizing which truckers liked their coffee before they sat down, which regulars needed 5 minutes to complain before they were ready to order, and which ones were pretending to be fine when they weren't. Those same instincts translated almost perfectly. By the end of her 2nd month, the scheduling backlog was gone. By the end of the 3rd, she'd renegotiated 2 of their parts contracts because she'd noticed the numbers weren't right and had simply asked about them, calmly and persistently, until they were. Vincent called that the most impressive thing to happen in this shop in years, and he said it in front of the mechanics, which mattered more than the raise he gave her. Cash started calling her the Iron Lady, which was a reference to something she didn't entirely understand but accepted. Ruthie came to see the shop in February. She stood in the parking lot in her good coat and looked at the sign over the door and at the row of motorcycles lined up along the wall and said, Well, isn't that something? Vincent came out of the office to meet her. They shook hands. He thanked her, which confused Ruthie briefly. For what? Ruthie said. For raising her, Vincent said. Ruthie thought about this for a moment. She raised herself, Ruthie said. I just kept the lights on. Vincent laughed, a real one, the kind Nadia hadn't heard from him before. The 3 men from the diner were handled eventually, through channels Nadia didn't ask about and didn't need to know. Cash told her simply that it had been dealt with and she believed him. Whether that was satisfying or not was a complicated question. She spent some time with it. What she landed on was this. Justice in the real world rarely arrives in the form you imagined, and accepting the form it actually takes is not the same thing as forgiving what happened. That was a lesson Ruthie had also taught her, though not in those exact words. The local news story got picked up once more in March. A follow-up piece, the kind local news does when they want a warm story for a slow week. They interviewed Nadia outside the shop. They asked her what it felt like to be called brave. She thought about the question for a moment. She was wearing the shop's logo on her jacket. The answer she gave was not what the reporter expected. "I think brave is a word people use," she said, "when they're surprised that someone did the obvious thing. What I did was obvious. He was on the floor, he needed help. I was the one standing there." The reporter looked at her notes, but no one else. "I know," Nadia said, "I know no one else did. And I'm not judging them. I was scared too. I was very scared." She paused, "But I was more scared of being the person who looked away. That's all. That's the whole thing." The segment aired on a Thursday. By Friday, the shop's phone had rung 43 times with people who'd seen it. Most of them were calling for bike repairs. A few were calling just to say something. One woman called from Ohio to say she'd been in a similar situation years ago and hadn't done what Nadia had done. And she'd thought about it almost every day since, and watching the video had made her cry, and she didn't know why she was calling except that she wanted someone to know. Nadia talked to her for 19 minutes. She didn't tell Vincent, but he knew. He'd heard it through the walls. That spring, Ruthie's doctor changed her medication. New prescription, better for her heart, also more expensive. Nadia covered the difference without saying anything about it. Ruthie found out anyway because she always did, and she sat Nadia down at the kitchen table and said, in the careful way she had, "I need you to let me say something." "Okay," Nadia said. "I have been watching you your whole life," Ruthie said, "and I have watched you do hard things. I watched you do hard things as a little girl when you shouldn't have had to. And I want you to know," she stopped. "Started over. I want you to know that I saw it, that I see you." Nadia didn't say anything. She reached across the table and took her grandmother's hand. That was enough. There is a version of this story where Nadia is a hero, and Vincent is rescued, and the good people win, and the bad people lose, and everything wraps up clean. That version is easier to tell. It has a clear shape. The real version is messier and better. The real version is a 23-year-old woman who had been taught by the world to look away, and who one October morning could not bring herself to do it. The real version is the small, unglamorous work of the months that followed, the parts orders and scheduling calls and prescription copays and 19-minute phone conversations with strangers from Ohio. The real version is a grandmother with tired eyes standing in a parking lot saying, "I see you." The big moments don't make you who you are. The big moments reveal who you already were, what you do before anyone is watching. The way you pour coffee for a man who can't get off the floor, the way you plant your feet even when your hands are shaking, the way you can't quite bring yourself to walk away. That's the thing that was always already there. You don't find that in the moment. You build it. Day by day, Tuesday by Tuesday, long before anyone is filming. Long before anyone asks you on the news what it felt like to be brave. You build it quietly, in double wides with bad heating, in diners that open at 5, in the choices no one sees. And then one morning, it's the only thing you have, and it turns out it's enough.